All right, what's up, everybody? So this video is intended to show you how it is that we can go about telling SPSS to produce an ANOVA analysis for us. So remember that an ANOVA stands for analysis of variance, and within this statistical test, we are talking about being able to compare three or more groups simultaneously. As opposed to with a t-test where we could compare two groups at once. Remember, ANOVA is for three or more, and it's all happening at once. So just to kind of set the stage for where we're at, the file that you see in front of you, this SPSS file that we're working with is still the 1K survey. And so for your assignment, you are still going to be using this same data file. So keep that in mind. I'm not expecting you to go out and find another data set. Keep everything contained to the 1K survey. All right. So I also want to say this now. I'll reiterate it again as we move through. With this example that we are going to move through in this video, the combination of variables that I'm going to use should not be the same combination that you use for your SPSS assignment. So in SPSS assignment number 3, I'm asking you to conduct two separate ANOVA analyses, and then you'll report on them. So please know that I'm just saying you can't use the same combination of variables. You can still choose, to keep the independent variable and maybe change your dependent variable, or keep your dependent variable, change your independent variable, but you cannot use the same combination. So like I said, I'll make sure I mention that again once we get to the point of running the analysis. So the first thing we're going to start with is really just finding the variables that we want to use. Because we are comparing three or more groups, we have to ensure that our independent variable has at least three groups within it. So the way that we're going to ensure this is the case is through this values column. Remember that it's through the values column that we would actually be taking the categories of the variable and identifying a number to correspond with that group. So with our race variable, we have at least, I think the race variable has 7 different categories. For this example that we're going to work through, I think we're just going to keep it to maybe closer to just 3 categories if we can find an appropriate variable for that. So I'm going to navigate within this variable view. I'm going to look at this study hours because it looks like it's an ordinal variable. Your independent variable should be an ordinal or nominal variable. This one has 6 categories. I'm gonna hold off on that. Let's see if mother's education level. This one has 5. I think that might be okay. So we're going to choose mother's education level as our independent variable, which means that in our analysis, we are comparing each of these 5 groups to one another. Now, off the top of my head, firstly, I'll say you want to make sure that your dependent variable is a scale variable. It has to use numbers because we have to be able to calculate an average that makes sense. So it's not only that it calculates the average, but that it's a meaningful average to us. So one of the first variables that comes to mind with this is our GPA variable, where we are asking students to let us know what their GPA is. So this is a scale variable. We've picked our 2 variables, mother's education level for our independent variable and GPA for our dependent variable. So this is where I'll say do not use that same combination for your assignments. You're welcome to keep mother's education and then apply a different dependent variable, or keep GPA and apply a different independent variable. Independent variable. So we'll come up to analyze, and the first thing that we want to include in our overall process of analysis is our frequency tables. Now this is part of what I am expecting you to take a screenshot of and include in your assignment to be graded. Remember that frequency tables allows us to see what is the data, what's the pattern of data within each variable itself. So to do that, we're going to come to the Analyze button. We're going to click on Descriptive Statistics, and then frequencies. We can actually run a frequency distribution for both variables at the same time. We don't need to do one analysis where we select frequency here and then do that separately for the other variable. We'll just combine them. So we'll put mother's education and then we'll place GPA. Remember that we want SPSS to give us, as part of the frequency tables, we want it to give us our measures of central tendency, specifically our mean, median, and mode. And so those are found within this statistics button. You select mean, median, and mode. Under this dispersion area, select standard deviation and variance. I'm wanting you to include all of this data in your frequency distributions. We're not going to produce any charts with this, and we can leave the remainder of these buttons as default, whatever they are. We'll click OK. And this is SPSS's output table for running a frequency on those two variables. So we have the mother's education level. We had 1,064 people who responded to that question. The GPA variable, 896 people responded to that question. We have an average, a median, and a mode for the mother's education level. But remember that not all measures of central tendency or measures of variability can be applied to all types of levels of measurement. For nominal and ordinal variables, it's definitely the case that you cannot calculate a mean for them. In some cases with ordinal variables, you might be able to calculate an average. For this particular ordinal variable of mother's education level, I'm sorry, not an average, the median. For mother's education level, we can't actually determine, we can determine a median for this one. It is meaningful to us. So we're able to kind of lay everything out, and the people that fell right in the middle are category 2, which we see down here. Category 2 is going to be associated with high school GED. And then we also have a mode of 2, which means that the same category, high school GED, was selected most often. That's our mode. So the mean, standard deviation, and variance for this mother's education level means nothing for us because those are not statistics that we can actually calculate with this variable. For GPA, however, we can do this. We can calculate both, not both, the mean, median, and mode, and we can also calculate standard deviation and variance. So this is our statistics table for these two variables. The frequency table for mother's education level shows us that these are the 5 categories that are found within this variable. No high school GED, AA or certificate, bachelor's in arts or bachelor's in science, and graduate school. These are the frequencies of people who selected those categories representing their mother's education level. And these are the various GPAs of those same students. So notice this goes anywhere from 1.25 all the way to 4.0. Okay? All right, so in order for us to conduct our analysis, we are more specifically our ANOVA. We're going to come up to analyze, and we are going to select compare means, and we're going to come down to where One Way ANOVA is. So One Way ANOVA, as you know, just a little bit of reinforcement from what you learned about in the PowerPoint. One Way ANOVA allows us to compare the groups to each other, right? So we are comparing one independent variable to each other. The categories in the independent variable to the other categories within that same independent variable. So we are comparing our no high school, the GPA of students whose mothers don't have high school, to those who have a high school diploma, to those who have an associate's degree, so on and so forth for each of our categories. In the PowerPoint, I also introduced you to the idea of two-way ANOVA. We're not going to do a two-way ANOVA within SPSS. There is a way to do it, but I think it falls outside of the scope of this class. And so we're going to focus only on the one-way ANOVA. So we'll select one-way ANOVA. This pop-up that is presented here may seem a little bit familiar. It looks very similar to the pop-up window for calculating a t-test. In this case, with the one-way ANOVA, the dependent list is where we're going to place our dependent variable. In this analysis, it's going to be GPA. The factor window is where we're going to be placing our independent variable. So that's going to be our mother's education level. Now, like I said, this may look a little bit familiar to when we were conducting a t-test. And if you happen to recall, when we placed the t-test variable into the grouping variable option within the t-test, we were presented with question marks. And those question marks were SPSS reminder to us that within that variable, we need to select which two groups are being compared. With ANOVA, we are not selecting which groups to compare. We are saying, here is our variable, compare every single group that's in here. Okay, so keep that in mind, that that's something important to understand about how ANOVA functions within SPSS, particularly One Way ANOVA. It's comparing every single group within your independent variable. It's not going to allow you to choose which groups to compare.